hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Go the Distance podcast. Don't forget, you may be watching us on Facebook or YouTube, but you can subscribe to our podcast on your podcast app on your smart device by searching Go the Distance. You see the logo behind us. Look for that logo when you search that podcast on your podcast app. Listen, we just come in here every single week and we have real, raw conversation about real, raw life issues. But beyond that, we just go the distance in the fact that we run our race. Whatever race God has called us to run, we run it, and we run it to completion. I was reminded again today, Galatians 6:9, not to grow weary in well-doing, to stay the course, and that we will reap a harvest in due season if we do not quit. I was talking to a church planter the other day that's like year 3. And you remember year 3?
Year 3's bad.
Year 3's hard. And just trying to encourage this church planter in year 3. And he asked this question. It's the question I get asked all the time. How did you go from Savannah Elementary School in 2008 to now? What's the secret sauce? What's the 10-step plan that got you from there to where you are now as a church and as church planters? And the answer always is this: I don't know. I don't know the answer, because the answer will always be different for everybody's contextual situation and everybody's culture in different towns and different cities. But here's what I do know. God rewards people who just keep showing up.
It's one day at a time.
One day at a time, one step at a time. And sometimes it's like one breath and one inhale and exhale at a time. But it's not just church planting. It's on your job. It's in parenting. It's in your marriage. Keep showing up. Every day, show up. Don't check out. Because if you'll run your race and go the distance, you will reap a harvest if you do not quit. God promises that through his word in Galatians 6:9. And so just keep showing up. And so in regards to that, I've brought in my lovely, beautiful wife, Sarah, again into the studio. She is the better half of everything in our home. She's the best half.
Except at sports.
That's correct. You're not an athlete. That's true. But you're an artist. And so you draw, you paint. You were a dancer in high school, drill teams, ballet, stuff like that. But you're the best cook in the house too, by the way. But we've been on this journey as a team from the very beginning of stepping out of the known into the unknown back in 2006.
Yeah.
And so here's what I want to do tonight. I brought Sarah in tonight because we just came off an amazing weekend at Rock Creek. We had a men's event where we had an amazing time with the men of our church, but Lynn Winters, our speaker for the men's event this year, man, he absolutely rocked the men's world in the life out of the book of Jonah and the life of Jonah. And he's like, for Jonah, Nineveh was the no. That was the one thing that he was going to say no to God even before God asked. No. And he challenged us. He says, what is your no? What have you already told God no, even if God were to ask? And he related that to our life now. And then he talked about the pause between Jonah saying no and actually being in the belly of the fish. There is a pause. There is a time there where it's like Jonah might think that he got away with saying no, but eventually his no sent him below, so waka waka, I'm riding. So anyway, that was great. And then he came in Sunday morning and spoke for us Sunday morning.
So good.
Oh my goodness, it was good out of Judges. And the paintbrush illustration, you can paint the story of your life, but it's going to be a mess if the brush is in your hand. But when the brush is in the hand of God, who's painting a master plan, it's a beautiful portrait and a masterful piece of art that he's painting. But we like to take the brush away.
Right.
But what he was talking about in regards to that was through the life of Gideon in Judges, where Gideon was not somebody would have been voted most likely to succeed in his graduating class. Gideon was from the forgotten tribe of Manasseh, and then he was not even a favored one in his own family. He was just ordinary. He could have been like in the bottom 10% of all of humanity when it came to ordinary. And yet the angel of the Lord comes to him and calls him mighty warrior, and all he's doing is he's just shaking the grain off of his wheat at the harvest season. But the Midianites were going to come in and ravage the Israelites, and God's going to use Gideon to destroy the Midianites and the hundreds of thousands of them with 300 men. But the battle had already been won before God ever called Gideon to it. And here's the phrase that Lynn used. Ordinary can do extraordinary when you opt into God's plan. And as I heard him say that, I started thinking about Rock Creek and the story of Rock Creek and how God has done extraordinary things because the ordinary opted into his plan. There is absolutely nothing special about you and me. Nothing. No. We're just ordinary people. I didn't grow up in a pastor's home. Now, I grew up in a great home. I grew up in a godly home, but my dad wasn't a pastor. My grandfather's not a pastor. I'm not like a fifth-generation pastor. Right. I had a little bit of a rebellious streak in my life in those years of 17 to 21, where I ran hard from God and as far from God as I could. You grew up in a home that was Methodist, and you guys weren't really strong church people. I mean, you went, but it was more of a thing to do rather than a relationship with God through Christ. And yet God puts us together in high school already with this grand plan for you and I. But beyond that, I started thinking about when I came to you in 2005. And I said, Sarah, I think God is calling us to start a church, to plant a church. And when I be church planters, you thought, man, is that like a living plant? Is that a fake plant? Can we
just buy one for the church?
Yeah, can we just buy a plant for the church? Is this one of these plants you smoke? You didn't know, and I didn't know either, but I knew just enough to be dangerous about church planting. You remember when I came to you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember your reaction?
Yes.
Do you remember what you said to me when I told you I thought God was calling us to plant a church?
I said you weren't ready.
Yeah.
And I knew, and that was an excuse on my part too, because I didn't want to be the poor church planter living in a van down by the river with our kids.
Well, Matt Foley had sure inspired you, didn't he?
Yeah, it was scary when you said that. I didn't want to have anything to do with that, and I immediately pushed back and said, nope.
Yeah, and when you said you're not ready, when you told me you're not ready, I took it, I never saw it that you were saying that to me because potentially you weren't ready. I took it as if you were saying to me, you're not at a place yet where you need to be in your journey with God to be the senior pastor of a church. Yeah. You're great at the staff pastor position, but to be the guy in chair one, you're not ready. And so I took that as a message from God because in most cases, the Holy Spirit's name at our house is Sarah. And so I said, okay, well, you just tell me when I'm ready. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to stay faithful right here at Midway Church, doing what I do, being Pastor John's right-hand man, leading the worship, whatever I have to do. But you just tell me when I'm ready. And you said, okay. And so I forgot about it. And you forgot about it. And we went on with life. And then, do you remember when you told me I was ready?
Oh, yeah. I think we went with the choir from Midway.
Several of the choir members, yeah.
Yeah. Went down to Prestonwood and Plano to they were debuting a new album with their choir.
Yeah, because we would buy their books,
yes,
their choral books, and we would buy that, and we would sing those songs at our church. And so they were debuting one of their albums.
Yep. So we all went down there to hear the concert, and it was wonderful. And in the midst of that concert,
I don't think there's anything at Prestonwood that's not wonderful when it comes to their worship and their music. It's majestic. I think their choir will be the choir in heaven. Yeah, so
it was good. It was good.
Yeah,
but God began to speak to me during one of the songs that they were singing, and it was one of those moments where I audibly heard him in the, back of my head. And I just heard everything's going to be okay. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. I didn't have to wonder what's going to be okay. I already knew.
Yeah.
And it was church planting. I knew he was telling me it's time to begin the process.
Yeah, so we're standing worshiping. Everybody's got their hands raised or clapping or whatever, and you lean over to me and you literally whisper in my ear and you said,
It's time.
yeah. You said it's time, and then you said you're ready.
Yeah.
And
And you're like, what?
and dumb me, I was like, ready for what? What am I ready for? And then later we talked that night and you unpacked it that God had spoke to you and said, now you're ready. And see, I don't know what I did to get there or if it was just you getting there.
It may have been me getting there, and I think just God's timing.
Yeah.
Waiting on him for him to push go rather than us forcing it.
Yeah.
We were following his lead.
So when you said you're ready, I didn't wait. You know me,
no.
grass doesn't grow under my feet.
I think that night you got on the phone as soon as we got home.
Yeah, with Josh Barrett. Yeah, and said, okay, she said I'm ready, so we're ready to move forward. But in relation to the sermon yesterday, or Sunday, I think that's when we opted into God's plan. And that step, one step of faith, as Lynn said Sunday, that one step, just one step of faith towards God, opting into his plan rather than our plan, putting the paintbrush in his hand, God began to paint an extraordinary masterpiece that we now all know as Rock Creek Church. And I want to be very clear. It's not because of us. It's not because there's anything in us that the world would say, yeah, they've got X, Y, and Z, so they're going to be successful. See, that's what I try to tell church planners when they ask me. You're looking for X, Y, and Z. You're looking for A, B, and C. You're looking for 1, 2, 3. You're looking for what is the key things. And it's not what you do or how you do it. It's the why behind it. And so we just set out to say, God, if you can use us, you can use anybody. And we're available. That's all we said. We're available. And your greatest ability is your availability. And so we said yes, and we began the journey. And Rock Creek, as it is now, actually started in November of 2007. That's when it started having weekly Bible studies. There was some monthly informational meetings in June, July, August, September, and October of 2007. We met once a month, and we just talked about vision, mission, culture. What are we doing here? Mm-hmm. We ate. We hated everything we did. But in November of 2007, we actually started having our weekly Bible study in a home. Then we moved from there to a doctor's office waiting room, and then from there we moved to the Savannah Elementary School, and we got going in the fall. We officially grand opened. Going back to that waiting room, because you worked at that doctor's office,
right,
and you know that waiting room, and thinking about the 25 to 30 adults that we put in that waiting room, shoulder to shoulder, singing the same 2 songs every week, because that was the only 2 songs that the lady who was leading us in worship knew on the guitar. Mm-hmm. A djembe drum or a cajon. Yeah. I don't even remember. It was either cajon or djembe. And singing the same 2 songs, me getting up, actually preaching a series. It was so dumb. Trying to be creative in a waiting room of a doctor's office. Could you ever have imagined, ever dreamed that it would be what it is now?
Oh, absolutely not. We had no idea the plans that God had for us when we opted into his plan. And I can just remember, every milestone, like getting into the school and just standing at the windows, watching for new people to show up, and then, pouncing on them to find out who they are. Tell us all about your family.
New people.
Will you come back next week?
Yeah.
And
one of the first new people that walked in, I remember, was Joel and Maury Decker.
Yeah.
And she was about to pop she's about to give birth to Zane, and so we were like, we got to be there when that baby's born.
Yeah.
We need them. We got to minister to that family. We got to be there for them because we want to reach them, you know. And
they have to come back.
yeah, and they've been integral parts of a part of our church now for 12 plus years. But
And every step along the way, from going to, from each school we were in was another step of faith, and then breaking, attendance records that we never in our wildest dreams would. I mean, to get to 500 was huge.
Yeah.
And now, what did we have this past Sunday?
1,220.
It's unbelievable. It's absolutely, like you said, nothing that has to do with either one of us.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like in a moment like this would have terrified me several years ago that you said, hey, I don't have a plan and I really don't know what we're talking about, but I need you to come do this podcast with me with no notes. And I would have panicked.
Yeah.
And because I'm a completely shy person by nature, and this would have been completely out of my box. And God has enabled me to come out of that.
Yeah.
Use me.
You're a wonderful first lady of the church, I have to say. In regards to some of the things that we're experiencing now, listen, every day is a new experience. Just because we had 12:20 on Sunday, it doesn't mean we've arrived. Because we went to lunch with Lynn and Lisa after church before they went to the airport, and they said, are you ready for 3,000? Because that's where you're headed. It's going to be at 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And you just better get ready. It's coming.
And so what do you do?
Yeah. And so, it's like, okay, well, you run 7,000. So tell me what I need to know to pastor at 3,000. What are some things that will change? What are some things that I need to do to be the leader that this church needs to be? And what are the hires we're going to have to make for staffing and just all of that, but to think that, they've experienced the same thing. They're 25 years in, and they started with just a few families in a clubhouse in an apartment complex years ago in Chandler, Arizona. And now here they are 25 years old as a church. And so again, Lynn will tell you, they just kept showing up. They just stayed faithful and they opted into the plan. Every time God gave them a new direction or a new plan, they just said yes. They just opted in. They just said, God used the ordinary to do the extraordinary. And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're going to continue to do. And one of the things that really made me aware of what God is doing here is that you are recently started 2 sessions of women's Bible studies, one on Tuesday morning and one on Tuesday night. By the way, if you want to get involved, Tuesday morning at what time?
10 a.m. Tuesday night at 7 p.m. in the lobby in the church.
Okay. So you have over 40 women that are on that roster.
Over 50.
Oh, over 50. My bad. Good first lady right there. She knows how to count. You have over 50 women on your roster. And the other day, you were sitting down at the desk working on some things, and you said, come here, I want to show you something. And you showed me your roster. And as I went down the roster, I recognized, I think, 9 last names.
I know.
9.
Yeah.
Now, that's not saying that I don't want to know the other last names. It's just saying they're new. Those are new names.
New since we came back from the COVID break.
Yeah, since May 24th.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is awesome.
Right.
That is incredible. God is expanding our reach.
Yes.
God is expanding the message that we have of the gospel and the hope in Jesus Christ to people that live around this facility out here. We're in the epicenter of massive growth. And God plainly tells us, to whom much is given, much is required. And God gave us this land. Now, we had to pay for it, but he made a way for us to get this piece of property in 2014 before all this started to happen. We cannot not do what God has called us to do. We can't sit idle. We can't get comfortable.
Absolutely.
Because God has given us way too much. He's taken ordinary and he's pulled back the curtain and showed extraordinary to us. And I'm so excited not to tell somebody, oh, we had 12:20 Sunday. Here's the thing. Most of my friends, I tell them we have 12:20 Sunday. They go, oh, cool, we had 9,000. Yeah. So it's like, okay, you had 12:20. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm
No.
talking about, listen, of the 1220, the best number is, as I shared this Sunday, since Christmas Eve, 30 people have said yes to Jesus. 30 people have given their life to Christ. That's 30 people who began to live eternally now.
Yeah. And at the men's event on Saturday, you had a huge.
Many men stood up and said yes to whatever God was calling them to. And it's just, I don't know what it is about our church.
Yeah.
Because I know us. And it's not us.
Yeah, no.
But there's something special going on at Rock Creek.
It's all the people at Rock Creek that also opted in to God's plan for the extraordinary
Come on.
in their lives.
That's awesome.
And they're in turn affecting other people. And I know for us, every time we have said yes, even in our fears, but said yes to God and his plan, he's always been faithful. No matter what it is, if we knew we were following what he wanted us to do, he was always faithful to see it through.
Yeah. You brought up a great point. And I want to go there with that thought. We weren't the only one that said yes
No,
in this ministry.
correct.
And that is one of the things I do say to young church planters when they ask me, give me the top 3. One of the top 3 is team. You cannot do
Yes.
this on your own. You have to have a group of people that buy into a vision that we are going to charge hell with a water gun.
Yeah.
And we're literally going to try to put out the flames. Because here's the thing. Jesus said in Matthew 16 that he was going to build his church. Not Brad going to build the
No.
church. He was going to build the church. And that the gates of Hades would not prevail against it, or the gates of hell. Listen, gates don't advance. Gates are security. The church advances against the gates of hell. The gates of hell are not advancing in the culture. The gates of hell are winning in culture because the church isn't advancing against those gates. And so we just said we wanted to be a church that advanced. We didn't, even though we have retreats, we didn't want to be a church that retreated. We wanted to advance with the gospel and the kingdom of God. We wanted to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. As Jesus said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We wanted to bring heaven to earth.
Right.
Because, and I'm getting ready to unpack this in the series that I'm starting this Sunday, The Kingdom. God's ultimate plan is not that you and I just get to heaven. God's plan for us is that we secure that eternity in heaven, but until we go there, we bring heaven here. When Jesus came, the kingdom came. When the king came, the kingdom came. And so that's what we've tried to do. How do you be the kingdom? Well, it could start with just by being nice to people. By, like, when you're checking out at Kroger, being friendly. When you're getting gas, in traffic, at work. Loving your neighbor as yourself is bringing the kingdom to earth. And so I just think Rock Creek has done that. Now, Rock Creek is not perfect. It's far from it because it's made up of imperfect people. But those imperfect people are following one vision behind the perfect Savior, Jesus Christ. And I know that through the years, there have been people that have come and gone at Rock Creek, back when it was COC and now Rock Creek. And I know as the years progress and pass, there'll be people who will come and go. People will say, it's not for me anymore, and they'll find another place to worship. And I know that's going to happen. That's the nature of life. No church is perfect. But here's what I want to say. Wherever you need to be, get there. The worst thing you can do is say, well, I don't need to be at Rock Creek anymore. Rock Creek's not the church for me, but then not go anywhere else.
Right.
It saddens me when people leave Rock Creek because something happens or something gets funky, because people can get funky and there's dysfunction in any body,
Any family.
any family.
Yeah.
And so they get crossways, or they get a little dysfunctional and they get a little goofy and they leave, or we get a little goofy and they leave, but they don't go anywhere else.
Right.
What good is that?
You have to find another good church family.
I heard a guy say one time, a pastor say, there are no bad people in this world, in church world. There are only misplaced people.
Right.
And so if Rock Creek's not the place where you need to be, find where you need to be. But I'm telling you straight up, God is doing something really, really amazing at Rock Creek. Not just here. I mean, all over the world.
Yeah.
I've said this before. I'll say it probably in this next series. The sun never sets on the ministry of Rock Creek
No.
because we're all the way. We're having effects in Asia.
Yep.
We're in the Caribbean. We're in
Africa.
Africa. We're in restricted countries. We're in Estonia, up in the old Soviet Union area. Our ministry is everywhere, and that all comes because a group of us said yes. Let's just try it. Let's see what happens. We had no idea how it'd play out, but I like how it's playing out. So here's my challenge to you tonight. God may not be calling you to plant a church. If he is, let's talk. Let's talk because that's what we do. We plant churches that plant churches. We're part of an organization, Converge, that plants churches that plant churches. And so we have a state initiative called Vision Texas. I happen to be the church planting director for Vision Texas for Converge. So if you're interested in planting a church, if God's moving you towards that, let's have a discussion. Let's begin that conversation. It may be 5 years from now, but let's start the conversation. You may say to me, I want to plant a church, and I may say, you're not ready.
That's right.
But let's start the conversation if God's leading there. But it may not be that. It may be, listen, men, it may be that God's calling you to stay, to not leave. It may be, ladies, that God's calling you not to give up on him.
Right.
It may be that you think that there's a better opportunity out there to make more money, but making more money is going to cause you to be away from your family. And you think, well, I can give my family more stuff, and your family might not want more stuff. They may just want more of you.
That's right.
God may be calling you to get involved financially in the ministry of Rock Creek, and you're currently struggling with that. I don't know what it is, but here's what I'm going to tell you. God does extraordinary with the ordinary when we opt into that plan, when we opt into that call, when we answer yes. Listen, say yes before God ever asks the question. Just put your yes right there on the table. Just lay it right there and say, God, whatever question you ask, the answer is yes. And I'll tell you this, in due season, in due time, you will reap a harvest. Mm-hmm. If you'll say yes and not give up on that yes and not quit.
And when you say yes, he'll be faithful.
Absolutely.
He's not going to take you down a road and just leave you and abandon you.
Absolutely. I've wanted to quit so many times. I've wanted to just quit ministry, quit Rock Creek. I've just wanted to go somewhere and never be seen again.
It's been a lot of Mondays of quitting.
Yeah. And it's not because it's bad. It's just discouragement or being down or being tired.
It's hard.
It's hard. Mm-hmm. The pain that you feel for people.
What did Lynn say on Sunday? On the other side of hard?
Oh, the miraculous happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Lions don't eat you. Right. Daniel on the other side of hard. You know, it's when you opt into God's plan, it gets harder. It doesn't get easier. But I'd much rather be in the difficult with God than be in the easy without God. That's the key, is in the valley, on the mountaintop, whether it's high or whether it's low. If he's with you, that's all that matters. And so here's what I'm saying to you. Whatever God is telling you, just opt in to God's plan. And listen, God's plan is that you would stay together. God's plan is that you'd be faithful in every area of your life with your time, your talents, and your treasures. God's plan is that you would be in community, in a group, that you'd go beyond just a chair on Sunday morning, that you would know and be known by others, that you could take the mask off and just be real and authentic. I'm telling you, God has something grand for all of us to do. Not just us, every one of you. God has a grand call on your life. And so many of us miss it because we fail to say yes. That's our challenge to you tonight. What is it? What is God's plan for your life? What has he called you to opt into? Listen, you may be labeled in the world as ordinary, but God saw your life before you were ever born. And he has a master plan, and he's painting a masterpiece. Put the paintbrush in his hand, let him continue to paint, and just put the yes on the table before he ever asks the question. Man, Sarah and I love you guys. We are so thrilled and honored to be your pastor and pastor's wife. We love what we do.
We do.
We love being with you guys each and every week on Sundays and throughout the week. And listen, we're all in. We're as all in as we've ever been. And we're not in it for the fame.
No.
We're not in it for numbers, but we're going to celebrate the numbers.
Yep.
We're going to celebrate the victories. Here's the thing. As I just obviously witnessed the death of my 90-year-old grandmother, here's the thing. When we get to the end of our life and a pastor has to stand and preach our funerals, I don't want him to have to lie.
Right.
I want to give him something to work with. And I want it to be celebrated as a life that was extraordinary. Not a life that could have been, but a life that was. And so that's my challenge to you. Give, especially me, if I'm the one that preaches your funeral, give me something to work with. Let's make a difference. Even if it's just one person. Let's do it. Let's say yes. God bless you guys. Thank you, Sarah,
You're
for
welcome.
being here. I love you.
Love you.
And can't wait to see what God has for us in the future. Y'all have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week
Good
right
night.
here on the Go the Distance podcast.